Hello, this is Carmen Nardini. I am reading today for the 52-week Bible study out of 2 Samuel, verses 10 through 14. And I will, and this is for Tuesday, and it's out of the 10. Sometime after this, the Ammonite king died, and his son Hanun replaced him. I'm going to show special respect for him, David said, because his father Nahash was also so loyal and kind to me. So David sent ambassadors to express regrets to Hanun about his father's death. But Hanun's officers told him, "These men aren't here to honor your father. David has sent them to spy out the city before attacking it." Sorry, it's tickle in my throat. So Hanun took David's men and shaved off half their beards and cut their robes off at the buttocks and sent them home half naked. When David heard what had happened, he told them to stay at Jericho until their beards grew out, for the men were very embarrassed over their appearance. Now the people of Ammon realized how seriously they had angered David. So they hired 20,000 Syrian mercenaries from the lands of Rehob and Zobah, and thousands from the king of Makkah, and 10,000 from the land of Tob. When David heard about this, he sent Joab and the entire Israel army to attack them. The Ammonites defended the gates of their city, while the Syrians from Zobah, Rehob, Tob, and Makkah fought in the fields. When Joab realized that he would have to fight on two fronts, he selected the best fighters in his army, placed them under his personal command, and took them out to fight the Syrians in the fields. He left the rest of the army to his brother Abishai, who was to attack the city. "If I need assistance against the Syrians, come out and help me," Joab instructed him. "And if the Ammonites are too strong for you, I will come and help you." Courage. We must really act like men today if we are going to save our people in the cities of our God. May the Lord's will be done. And when Joab and his troops attacked, the Syrians began to run away. Then, when the Ammonites saw the Syrians running, they ran too and retreated into the city. Afterward, Joab returned to Jerusalem. The Syrians now realized that they were no match for Israel. So when they regrouped, they were joined by additional Syrian troops summoned by Hadadezer from the other side of the Euphrates River. These troops arrived at Hilam under the command of Shobach, the commander-in-chief of all of Hadadezer's forces. When David heard what was happening, he personally led the Israel army to Hilam, where the Syrians attacked him. But again, the Syrians fled from the Israelis, this time leaving 700 charioteers dead on the field, also 40,000 cavalrymen, including General Shobach. When Hadadezer allies saw that the Syrians had been defeated, they surrendered to David and became his servants. And the Syrians were afraid to help the Ammonites anymore after that. 11. In the spring of the following year, at the same time when wars begin, David sent Joab and the Israel army to destroy the Ammonites. They began by laying siege to the city of Rabbah. When David stayed in Jerusalem, one night he couldn't get to sleep and went for a stroll on the roof of the palace. As he looked out over the city, he noticed a woman of unusual beauty taking her evening bath. He sent to find out who she was and was told that she was Bathsheba, the daughter of Eliam and the wife of Uriah. Then David sent for her, and when she came, he slept with her. She had just completed the purification rites after menstruation. Then she returned home. When she found that he had gotten her pregnant, she sent a message to inform him. So David dispatched a memo to Joab, "Send me Uriah the Hittite." When he arrived, David asked him how Joab and the army were getting along and how the war was prospering. Then he told him to go home and relax, and he sent a present to him at his home. But Uriah didn't go there. He stayed that night at the gateway of the palace with the other servants of the king. When David heard what Uriah had done, he summoned him and asked him, "What's the matter with you? Why didn't you go home to your wife last night after being away for so long?" Uriah replied, "The ark and the armies and the general and his officers are camping out in open fields. And should I go home to wine and dine with and sleep with my wife? I swear that I will never be guilty of acting like that." "Well, stay here tonight," David told him, "and tomorrow you may return to the army." So Uriah stayed around the palace. David invited him to dinner and got him drunk. But even so, he didn't go home that night. But again, he slept at the entry to the palace. Finally, the next morning, David wrote a letter to Joab and gave it to Uriah to deliver. The letter instructed Joab to put Uriah at the front of the hottest part of the battle, and then pull back and leave him there to die. So Joab assigned Uriah to a spot close to the besieged city, where he knew that the enemy's best men were fighting. And Uriah was killed along with several other Israeli soldiers. When Joab sent a report to David of how the battle was going, he told his messenger, "If the king is angry and asks, 'Why did the troops go so close to the city? Didn't they know there would be shooting from the walls? Wasn't Abba?' Then tell him Uriah was killed too." So the messenger arrived at Jerusalem and gave the report to David. "The enemy came out against us," he said, "and as we chased them back to the city gates, men on the wall attacked us, and some of our men were killed, and Uriah the Hittite is dead too." "Well, tell Joab not to be discouraged," David said. "The sword kills one as well as another. Fight harder next time and conquer the city. Tell him he is doing well." When Bathsheba heard that her husband was dead, she mourned for him. Then, when the period of mourning was over, David sent for her and brought her to the palace, and she became one of his wives, and she gave birth to a son. But the Lord was very displeased with what David had done. So the Lord sent the prophet Nathan to tell David this story. There were two men in a certain city, one very rich, owning many flocks of sheep and herds of goats, and the other very poor, owning nothing but a little lamb he had managed to buy. It was his children's pet, and he fed it from his own plate and let it drink from his own cup. He cuddled it in his arms like a baby daughter. Recently, a guest arrived at the home of the rich man, but instead of killing a lamb from his own flocks for food for the traveler, he took the poor man's lamb and roasted it and served it. David was furious. "I swear by the living God," he vowed, "any man who would do a thing like that should be put to death. He shall repay 4 lambs to the poor man with the one he stole, and for having no pity." Then Nathan said to David, "You are that rich man. The Lord God of Israel says, 'I made you king of Israel and saved you from the power of Saul. I gave you his palace and his wives and the kingdom of Israel and Judea. And if that had not been enough, I would have given you much, much more. Why then have you despised the laws of God and done this horrible deed? For you have murdered Uriah and stolen his wife. Therefore, murder shall be a constant threat in your family from this time on, because you have insulted me by taking Uriah's wife." Just pardon me for half a second. Come here. Back to reading. I apologize for that. My dog was acting up. Okay. "Why then have you despised the laws of God and done this horrible deed? For you have murdered Uriah and stolen his wife. Therefore, murder shall be a constant threat in your family from this time on, because you have insulted me by taking Uriah's wife. I vow that because of what you have done, I will cause your own household to rebel against you. I will give your wives to another man, and he will go to bed with them in public view. You did it secretly, but I will do this to you openly in the sight of Israel. I have sinned against the Lord," David confessed to Nathan. Then Nathan replied, "Yes, but the Lord has forgiven you, and you won't die for this sin. but you have given great opportunity to the enemies of the Lord to despise and blaspheme him. So your child shall die. Then Nathan returned to his home, and the Lord made Bathsheba's baby deadly sick. David begged him to spare the child and went without food and lay all night before the Lord on the bare earth. The leaders of the nation pleaded with him to get up and eat with them, but he refused. Then on the seventh day, the baby died. David's aides were afraid to tell him. He was so broken up about the baby being sick, they said. What will he do to himself when we tell him the child is dead? But when David saw them whispering, he realized what had happened. Is the baby dead? He asked. Yes, they replied, he is. Then David got up off the ground, washed himself, brushed his hair, changed his clothes, and went into the tabernacle and worshipped the Lord. He returned to the palace and ate. His aides were amazed. We don't understand you, they told him. While the baby was still living, you wept and refused to eat. But now that the baby is dead, you have stopped your mourning and are eating again. David replied, I fasted and wept while the child was alive. For I said, perhaps the Lord will be gracious to me and let the child live. But why should I fast when he is dead? Can I bring him back again? I shall go to him, but he shall not return to me. Then David comforted Bathsheba, and when he slept with her, she conceived and gave birth to a son and named him Solomon. And the Lord loved the baby and sent congratulations and blessings through Nathan the prophet. David nicknamed the baby Jedediah, meaning beloved of Jehovah, because of the Lord's interest. Meanwhile, Joab and the Israeli army were successfully ending their siege of Rabbah, the capital of Ammon. Joab sent messengers to tell David, Rabbah, and it's beautiful that you will get the credit for the victory instead of me. So David led his army to Rabbah and captured it. Tremendous amounts of loot were carried back to Jerusalem, and David took the king of Rabbah's crown, a 50,000 treasure made from solid gold set with gems, and placed it on his own head. He made slaves of the people of the city and made them labor with saws, picks, and axes and work in the brick kilns. That is the way he treated all of the cities of the Ammonites. Then David and the army returned to Jerusalem. Prince Absalom, David's son, had a beautiful sister named Tamar. And Prince Amnon, her half-brother, fell desperately in love with her. Amnon became so tormented by his love for her that he became ill. He had no way of talking to her, for the girls and young men were kept strictly apart. But Amnon had a very crafty friend, his cousin Jonadab, the son of David's brother Shimeah. One day Jonadab said to Amnon, what's the trouble? Why should the son of a king look so haggard morning after morning? So Amnon told him, I am in love with Tamar, my half-sister. Well, Jonadab said, I'll tell you what to do. Go back to bed and pretend you are sick. When your father comes to see you, ask him to let Tamar come and prepare some food for you. Tell him you'll feel better if she feeds you. So Amnon did, and when the king came to see him, Amnon asked him for this favor, that his sister Tamar be permitted to come and cook a little something for him to eat. David agreed and sent word to Tamar to go to Amnon's quarters and prepare some food for him. So she did and went into his bedroom so that he could watch her mix some dough. Then she baked some special bread for him. But when she set the serving tray before him, he refused to eat with his servants. So they all left the apartment. Then he said to Tamar, now bring me the food again here in my bedroom and feed it to me. So Tamar took it to him. But as she was standing there before him, he grabbed her and demanded, come to bed with me, my darling. Oh, Amnon, she cried, don't be foolish. Don't do this to me. You know what a serious crime it is in Israel. Where could I go in my shame? And you would be called one of the greatest fools in Israel. Please just speak to the king about it, for he will let you marry me. But he wouldn't listen to her, and since he was stronger than she, he forced her. Then suddenly his love turned to hate, and now he hated her more than he had loved her. Get out of here, he snarled at her. No, no, she cried. To reject me now is a greater crime than the others you did to me. But he wouldn't listen to her. He shouted for his valet and demanded, throw this woman out and lock the door behind her. So he put her out. She was wearing a long robe with sleeves, as was the custom in those days for virgin daughters of the king. Now she tore the robe and put ashes on her head, and with her head in her hands went away crying. Her brother Absalom asked her, "Is it true that Amnon raped you? Don't be so upset, since it's all in the family anyway. It's not anything to worry about." So Tamar lived as a desolate woman in her brother Absalom's quarters. When it happened, he was very angry. But Absalom said nothing one way or the other about this to Amnon. However, he hated him with a deep hatred because of what he had done to his sister. Then 2 years later, when Absalom's sheep were being sheared at Baal-hazor in Ephraim, Absalom invited his father and all his brothers to come to a feast to celebrate the occasion. The king replied, "No, my boy, if we all came, we would be too much of a burden on you." Absalom pressed him, but he wouldn't come, though he sent his thanks. "Well then, Absalom, if you don't come, how about sending my brother Amnon instead?" "Why Amnon?" the king asked. Absalom kept on urging the matter until finally the king agreed and let all of his sons attend, including Amnon. Absalom told his men, "Wait until Amnon gets drunk. Then, at my signal, kill him. Don't be afraid. I'm the one who gives the orders around here, and this is a command. Take courage and do it." So they murdered Amnon. Then the other sons of the king jumped on their mules and fled. As they were on the way back to Jerusalem, the report reached David, "Absalom has killed all of your sons, and not one is left alive." The king jumped up, ripped off his robe, and fell prostrate to the ground. His aides also tore their clothes in horror and sorrow. Just then, Jonadab, the son of David's brother Shimea, arrived and said, "No, not all have been killed. It was only Amnon. Absalom has been plotting this ever since Amnon raped Tamar. No, no, your sons aren't all dead. It was only Amnon." Absalom got away. Now the watchmen on the Jerusalem wall saw a great crowd coming toward the city along the road at the side of the hill. "See," Jonadab told the king, "there they are now. Your sons are coming, just as I said." They soon arrived, weeping and sobbing, and the king and his officials wept with them. Absalom fled to King Talmai of Geshur and the son of Ammihud, and stayed there 3 years. Meanwhile, David, now reconciled to Amnon's death, longed day after day for fellowship with his son Absalom. When General Joab realized how much the king was longing to see Absalom, he sent for a woman of Tekoa, who had a reputation for great wisdom, and told her to ask for an appointment with the king. He told her what to say to him. "Pretend you are in mourning," Joab instructed her. "Wear mourning clothes and dishevel your hair as though you have been in deep sorrow for a long time." When the woman approached the king, she fell face downward on the floor in front of him and cried, "Oh, king, help me." "What's the trouble?" he asked. "I'm a widow," she replied, "and my 2 sons had a fight out in the field, and since no one was there to part them, one of them was killed. Now the rest of the family is demanding that I surrender my other son to them to be executed for murdering his brother. But if I do that, I will have no one left, and my husband's name will be destroyed from the face of the earth. Leave it with me," the king told her. "I'll see to it that no one touches him." "Oh, thank you, my lord," she replied. "Responsibility if you are criticized for helping me like this." "Don't worry about that," the king replied. "If anyone objects, bring him to me. I can assure you he will never complain again." Then she said, "Please swear to me by God that you won't let anyone harm my son. I want no more bloodshed." "I vow by God," he replied, "that not a hair on your son's head shall be disturbed." "Please let me of you," she asked. She said, "Go ahead," he replied. "Speak. Why don't you do as much for all the people of God as you have promised to do for me?" she asked. "You have convicted yourself in making this decision because you have refused to bring home your own banished son. All of us must die eventually. Our lives are like water that is poured out on the ground. It can't be gathered up again. But God will bless you with a longer life if you will find a way to. My life and my son's life have been threatened, and I said to myself, perhaps the king will listen to me and rescue us from those who would end our existence in Israel. Yes, the king will give us peace again. I know that you can discern good from evil. May God be with you." I want to know one thing, the king replied. Yes, my lord. She asked, Did Joab send you here? And the woman replied, How can I deny it? Yes, Joab sent me and told me what to say. He did it in order to place the matter before you in a different light. But you are as wise in it as an angel of God, and you know everything that happens. So the king sent for Joab and told him, All right, go and bring back Absalom. Joab fell on the ground before the king and blessed him and said, At last I know that you like me, for you have granted me this request. Then Joab went to Jeshurun and brought Absalom back to Jerusalem. He may go to his own quarters, the king ordered, but he must never come here. I refuse to see him. Now, no one in Israel was such a handsome specimen of manhood as Absalom, and no one else received such praise. He cut his hair only once a year, and then only because it weighed 3 pounds and was too much of a load to carry around. He had 3 sons and 1 daughter, Tamar, who was a very beautiful girl. After Absalom had been in Jerusalem for 2 years and had not yet seen the king, he sent for Joab to ask him to intercede for him. But Joab wouldn't come. Absalom sent for him again, but again he refused to come. So Absalom said to his servants, Go and set fire to the barley field of Joab's next to mine. And they did. Then Joab came to Absalom and demanded, Why did your servants set my field on fire? And Absalom replied, Because I wanted you to ask the king why he brought me back from Jeshurun if he didn't intend to see me. I might as well have stayed there. Let me have an interview with the king. Then if he finds that I am guilty of murder, let him execute me. So Joab told the king what Absalom had said. Then at last David summoned Absalom, and he came and bowed low before the king, and David kissed him. And that's all for this reading. Oh, that was weird. That's all for this reading. Thanks for listening.